The screeching of metal against metal pierced the air as the train barreled toward the collapsed bridge. In those final moments, as passengers braced for impact, Michael Reeves made a choice that would save everyone aboard, except himself. But what happened next would rewrite this tragedy in ways no one could have imagined. If you're moved by stories of ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances, hit that like button and subscribe to witness more tales that remind us of the incredible resilience of the human spirit. The morning had begun like any other for Michael Reeves. At 42, his life revolved around two things: his job as a train engineer and his daughter, Lily. The alarm blared at 4:30 a.m., and Michael's hand instinctively reached to silence it before it could wake his sleeping 12-year-old. Their modest two-bedroom apartment in Millfield wasn't much, but it was home, the place where he'd raised Lily alone since his wife's passing 6 years ago. Michael moved quietly through his morning routine, the floorboards creaking beneath his careful steps. He paused at Lily's bedroom door, pushing it open just enough to see her sleeping form, her chestnut hair, so like her mother's, splayed across the pillow. These quiet moments were sacred to him, a daily reminder of everything he had to live for. "Dad?" Lily's sleepy voice called out as he was about to close the door. "Hey, sweetheart," Michael whispered, stepping into the room. "Didn't mean to wake you." Lily rubbed her eyes, sitting up in bed. "You didn't. I wanted to be up to say goodbye." Michael sat on the edge of her bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. "You should be sleeping. It's not even 5 yet." "I had that dream again," Lily said, her voice small. "The one where you don't come home." Michael's heart clenched. Since losing her mother, Lily had developed an almost preternatural fear of losing him too. He gathered her into his arms, feeling her thin shoulders beneath his palms. "It's just a dream, Lil. I always come home to you, don't I?" Lily nodded against his chest, but her grip on him tightened. "Promise you'll be careful today?" "Cross my heart," Michael said, making the gesture over his chest. "Now, Mrs. Abernathy will be here at 7 to take you to school. I want you to eat a proper breakfast, okay? Not just cereal." "Yes, Dad," Lily said with an exaggerated sigh that made him smile. "That's my girl. I'll be home for dinner, and we can watch that movie you've been talking about." "The one with the dragons?" "That's the one," Michael confirmed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I love you to the moon and back. And to the stars and beyond." Lily finished their ritual, finally releasing him. As Michael left the apartment, he couldn't shake the feeling of Lily's arms around him, the lingering worry in her eyes. He'd been driving the Millfield to Lakeside route for nearly 15 years now, and nothing remotely dangerous had ever happened. Today would be no different, he assured himself. The train station was quiet when Michael arrived, the early morning mist hanging low over the tracks. He nodded to the night security guard and made his way to the staff room where his coworkers were already gathering for the morning briefing. "Morning, Reeves," called out Frank Donovan, the station manager. "Ready for another thrilling day of watching the countryside roll by?" "Beat sitting behind a desk all day," Michael replied with a grin, pouring himself a cup of coffee. The briefing was routine: weather conditions, track maintenance updates, passenger numbers. Nothing out of the ordinary. By 5:45 a.m., Michael was in the engineer's cabin, running through his pre-departure checks with practiced efficiency. His co-engineer for the day, Samantha Chen, arrived minutes later, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. At 35, Sam was one of the few female engineers at the company, and easily one of the most competent people Michael had ever worked with. "Morning, Mike," she said, sliding into the seat beside him. "How's Lily?" "Growing up too fast," Michael replied with a rueful smile. "She's got a science fair coming up next week. Building a model of the solar system that actually rotates." "Smart kid," Sam commented. "Takes after her dad." "Nah, that's all her mom," Michael said, the familiar pang in his chest whenever he mentioned Claire. Claire was the brains in the family. Sam gave him a sympathetic look but didn't press. They'd worked together long enough to know each other's boundaries. The first passengers began boarding at 6:15 a.m. The Millfield to Lakeside route was popular with commuters, and by departure time at 6:30, the train was nearly full. Michael watched through the cabin window as people settled into their seats, businessmen and women with briefcases, college students with backpacks, elderly couples heading into the city for the day. Each face represented a life, a story, a responsibility that Michael carried with him every time he took control of the train. It was a weight he'd grown accustomed to over the years, one he bore with quiet pride. "All systems go," Sam confirmed, completing her final checks. "Ready when you are." Michael nodded, his hands finding their familiar positions. The train pulled away from the station with a gentle lurch, gradually picking up speed as it left Millfield behind. The morning sun was just beginning to break through the clouds, casting long shadows across the landscape. Michael settled into the rhythm of the journey, the gentle sway of the train beneath him, the hypnotic click-clack of wheels against tracks. For the first hour, everything proceeded exactly as it always did. They passed through small towns and stretches of farmland, the world outside the window transforming from rural to increasingly urban as they approached Lakeside. It was as they were crossing the Millfield River, about 20 miles outside of Lakeside, that Michael first noticed something wasn't right. A subtle vibration ran through the train, different from the usual movement. "You feel that?" he asked Sam, his brow furrowing. Sam nodded, already checking the instrument panels. Nothing showing up on the diagnostics. Michael's instincts, honed by years of experience, were sending warning signals. He reduced their speed slightly, eyes scanning the tracks ahead. That's when he saw it, a section of the bridge ahead where the metal appeared to be buckling, warping under some invisible pressure. His heart rate spiked, hands moving automatically to the emergency brakes. "Sam, call dispatch. The bridge is compromised." Sam's face paled as she spotted what Michael had seen, her fingers flying to the radio. "Dispatch, this is train 427. We have an emergency situation at Millfield River Bridge. The structure appears to be failing. Initiating emergency stop procedures." Michael's mind raced as he calculated distances and stopping times. They were moving too fast, the bridge too close. Even with the emergency brakes engaged, physics was against them. The train, with its massive weight and momentum, couldn't possibly stop in time. "It's not going to hold," he said, his voice eerily calm despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "We need to evacuate the passengers to the rear cars." Sam was already on the intercom, her voice steady as she instructed passengers to move quickly but calmly toward the back of the train. Michael could hear the confusion and panic beginning to spread through the cars behind them. The bridge was now less than half a mile away, the deformation in the metal clearly visible. Michael's mind flashed to Lily, her smile, her laugh, the way she looked at him like he could fix anything in the world. "I'm sorry, Lil," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." In that moment, Michael made a decision. He turned to Sam, his expression resolute. "Get to the back with the passengers. I'm going to try something." "What?" "No, Michael, whatever you're thinking." "There's no time to argue," he cut her off. "The front car is going to take the impact. If I can manipulate the controls just right, I might be able to keep the rear cars from following it down." "That's suicide," Sam protested, her eyes wide with horror. "Maybe," Michael acknowledged. "But it's the only chance those people have. Think of it as a controlled derailment." "Michael." "Go, Sam. Please. Tell Lily I love her more than anything in this world." Sam hesitated for one more second before squeezing his shoulder and rushing out of the cabin. Michael turned his full attention to the controls, his mind calculating angles and forces, searching for the impossible solution that might save everyone except himself. The bridge was now visible through the front window, the metal groaning audibly even over the sound of the train. Michael could see where the structure was failing, a critical support beam twisted at an unnatural angle. He engaged a series of maneuvers, manipulating the train's systems in ways they were never designed to be used. His hands moved with precision born of desperation, each action deliberate and focused. The front of the train hit the weakened section of the bridge at precisely the moment Michael had calculated. Metal screamed against metal as the locomotive began to tip forward, the bridge collapsing beneath it. Michael braced himself for the inevitable, a strange calm washing over him. His last thought was of Lily, waiting at home for a father who wouldn't return. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Elena Vasquez had been running late that morning. At 38, the structural engineer had built her career on being meticulous and punctual, but a flat tire had delayed her arrival at the Millfield River Bridge where her team was conducting routine inspections. When she finally arrived, her trained eye immediately spotted what her colleagues had missed: hairline fractures in a critical support beam, the early signs of metal fatigue that could lead to catastrophic failure. Elena had immediately called for an emergency closure of the bridge, but the bureaucratic wheels turned slowly. As she argued with her supervisor over the phone, she watched in horror as train 427 approached in the distance. There wasn't time for official channels. Elena made a split-second decision that would alter the course of dozens of lives. She sprinted to her truck, grabbed the emergency flares she kept for roadside emergencies, and ran onto the tracks, igniting them as she went. The bright red flares cut through the morning mist, a desperate warning to the oncoming train. Elena stood her ground, waving her arms frantically, knowing she was risking her own life but unable to do anything else. Inside the train's cabin, Michael spotted the flares and the lone figure on the tracks. It was the warning he needed, just enough time to engage the emergency brakes earlier than he would have otherwise. Those precious extra seconds made all the difference. The train screeched to a halt mere yards from the weakened section of the bridge. The sudden stop sent passengers tumbling, resulting in minor injuries but nothing compared to the disaster that had been averted. When Michael stepped out of the cabin, shaking with adrenaline and relief, he found himself face to face with Elena, her dark eyes wide with the same mixture of fear and triumph that he felt. "You could have been killed," were his first words to her. "So could you," she replied, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "So could everyone on this train." In the chaos that followed, the evacuation of passengers, the arrival of emergency services, the media frenzy, Michael and Elena found themselves repeatedly thrown together. She explained how she'd spotted the structural weakness, how she'd known the bridge couldn't support the weight of the train. "You saved everyone," Michael told her as they sat side by side on the back of an ambulance, shock blankets draped over their shoulders. Elena shook her head. "We saved everyone. Together." When Michael finally made it home that evening, hours later than promised, Lily threw herself into his arms with a force that nearly knocked him over. "You're late," she accused, her voice muffled against his chest. "I was so worried." "I know, sweetheart," Michael said, holding her tight. "I'm sorry. But I'm home now." "The news said there was almost an accident," Lily said, pulling back to look at him with eyes too knowing for her 12 years. "They said a lady saved the train." "She did," Michael confirmed. "Her name is Elena. And she's pretty amazing." What Michael didn't tell Lily that night was how Elena had given him her number, how they'd agreed to meet for coffee once the investigation was complete. He didn't tell her about the connection he'd felt with the brave engineer, the first spark of something he'd thought he'd never feel again after Claire. Those conversations would come later, as would the nightmares, Michael waking in a cold sweat, the phantom sensation of falling still gripping him. Elena had her own demons to battle, the what-ifs that plagued her in quiet moments. They found solace in each other, two people who understood the weight of responsibility, the razor's edge between disaster and salvation. Their relationship developed slowly, cautiously, with the careful consideration of two people who knew how quickly life could change. Lily was wary at first, protective of her father and the memory of her mother. But Elena approached their relationship with patience and respect, never trying to replace Claire but instead creating her own unique bond with the perceptive young girl. 6 months after the near disaster at Millfield River Bridge, Elena joined Michael and Lily for dinner at their apartment. As they sat around the small kitchen table, sharing stories and laughter, Michael was struck by how natural it felt, how right. Later that evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Michael and Elena stood on the small balcony, looking out at the city lights. "I've been thinking," Michael said, his voice soft in the night air, "about what would have happened if you hadn't been there that day." Elena turned to face him, her expression serious. "But I was there. That's what matters." "I know," Michael agreed. "It's just, I had accepted it, you know. In those moments before I saw your flares, I had accepted that I was going to die." "But you didn't," Elena reminded him, taking his hand in hers. "You're here. We're here." Michael looked down at their intertwined fingers, marveling at the twist of fate that had brought them together. "When Claire died, I thought that was it for me. I thought Lily would be the only love left in my life. And now?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Now I know better," Michael said, meeting her gaze. "Now I know that sometimes life gives you a second chance when you least expect it." Elena's smile was like sunrise breaking through clouds. "I think we both got a second chance that day." As they stood together under the stars, Michael thought about the fragility of life, how quickly everything could change. He thought about the train that had nearly plunged into the river, about the split-second decisions that had saved so many lives. But mostly, he thought about the woman beside him, who had quite literally changed the ending of his story. 1 year to the day after the Millfield Bridge incident, Michael, Elena, and Lily stood together on a different bridge, this one solid and secure. Below them, the river flowed peacefully, catching the light of the setting sun. "Ready?" Michael asked, looking at the two most important people in his life. Lily nodded, her face solemn as she held the paper lantern in her hands. Elena stood beside her, an arm around the girl's shoulders. Together, they lit the lantern and released it into the evening sky, watching as it joined dozens of others floating above the river, one for each life that had been saved that day. "To second chances," Elena said softly. "And to changed endings," Michael added, taking her hand. As the lanterns drifted higher, becoming indistinguishable from the emerging stars, Michael reflected on how close he had come to missing all of this, Lily growing up, falling in love again, building a new family that honored the past while embracing the future. The train had been seconds from disaster, and a single dad had been prepared to sacrifice everything to save the passengers in his care. But one woman had changed the ending, not just of that day, but of all the days that followed. Life, Michael had learned, was not about the disasters we face, but about the people who help us survive them. It was about finding courage in moments of fear, hope in times of despair, and love when we least expect it. As they turned to leave, Lily walking ahead of them, Elena leaned into Michael's side. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd been just a few minutes later that day?" Michael shook his head. "I used to. But not anymore. Now I just focus on being grateful that you weren't." The future stretched before them, full of possibilities neither could have imagined in those terrifying moments on the bridge. There would be challenges ahead, there always were in life, but they would face them together, three people bound by fate and choice and love. And that, Michael knew, was the most beautiful ending of all. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of courage, second chances, and the unexpected ways our lives can change in an instant. Remember, sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives come after what we thought was the end of our story.